one exercise that really helps in recognizing ideal customers, I have a few that I'll mention, but one is called the year in review. I've written a few topics about this, why a year in review is necessary and why it helps. An example of my year in review from last year, examples of, I think it was 31 year in review examples from other people around the world. And so that topic is really helpful just because it's a process that helps you dive into what happened in the last year, how it happened, whether you reached your goals or not. And if you didn't set goals, you can still make sense of how you moved the needle toward certain levels or how you did not. And then it just provides a really black and white, objective way of looking at your business, so that maybe you didn't do as well financially, you didn't make as much profit, but look at how the relationships you've established and the work that you've done and the new topics you've created, or you're now speaking at different events, or you have a new product that you're selling. So it also provides ways of measuring success in a lot of different areas rather than just the number of the profit margin alone. That is the most important number in any business because it's the one that tells you whether you're healthy financially. But there's so many other ways to measure that. So I encourage you to look up my articles on the year in review to get an idea on how to do that. The other aspect of finding an ideal customer has to do with a client rating system. I have an example here. It's based on an idea from Dr. Alan Weiss, who wrote the Consulting Bible. You don't have to be a consultant to understand this or to appreciate the benefit of this, but it's basically a way of going through 4 aspects of your company and your work and asking yourself questions that you can then measure in numeric terms. You just write your the weight amount of how important something is for each of these 20 questions, and then you rate each client in the same way and you come up with a total, and that total will tell you whether that client is in a range that you've predetermined would be ideal or not. Are they ideal for your work, for your services, or are they not ideal and really appropriate for someone else's services? That's the question that this can answer. So they're in 4 categories, the system that I came up with. The first is the work itself. Is the work challenging? Are your objectives 100% clear with this client? Are the measures of how you're going to get there 100% clear? Is the value they receive 100% clear? And do you feel confident that you can help that customer succeed? So I created weighted amounts for each of these. I give the first one as work challenging an 8 out of 10. And then the next 3 I gave a 10 out of 10, like that's the most important for me. And then do I feel confident I can help them succeed? I gave it a 9. So the next section is on the buyer itself. Has the buyer worked with consultants before or with your type of service before? Is the buyer an early adopter? Meaning do they decide on something before anybody else in their peer group does? Are they one of those like buy the Apple Watch before anyone else has it, or line up all night to wait for something new to come out? So would they try something new before anybody else? I consider that a 5. I didn't think that was as important. Does the buyer treat the consultant or the expert as a partner? To me, that was a 10. And this is just my example from what Dr. Weiss suggested. It's not something you have to copy exactly. Like I said, I'll share my template with you on my blog post about this, but basically it's a way of lining up the areas of your company, the work that you do, the type of buyer that you serve, the qualities of that buyer, and then finally the benefits that you get personally. Do you feel connected to that person? Does this project further your brand? Is there a high profit margin? Does the project utilize your talents? So when you review each of the past clients you've served, or the customers that maybe could fall anywhere on ideal or not ideal. How closely do these people, does that one person relate to each of these categories? So then you add up the scores, and I was actually shocked when I did this the first time with all of my past clients and current clients to see that people I thought I was really benefiting and working really hard with were actually really low on the score, which means that when you add everything together and you weight it by, how much each of these questions is important, the total percentage for that particular client was lower than what I expected from my memory of the events and serving their needs, which means that overall that person was not a good fit for what I believe how the work should be done, whether that person gets the most benefit from my services, if they have qualities that maybe don't align with my ability to help them, if I don't feel confident helping them, and also that I don't feel that the client's needs have really impacted me in a positive way. Like I haven't felt totally confident after that the client project was done. So I just found this to be really helpful since I'm a numbers person. These percentages really gave me something to hold on to. I did this for, I think about, 30 or 40 different people from all the work that I've done. And I was really surprised to see that certain people were very high and other people were very low, and a lot of people are in the middle. So I took the people with the highest percentage, and then I thought through the qualities that make all of them have in common, or at least some categories of things that they share in common. So that became the framework from which I developed other tools. I thought about some KPIs that might be important in serving their needs. So that was the second question. What numbers should I look at to know I'm serving ideal customers? I based it on this client rating system. So some KPIs for you might be the AR, the accounts receivable, from each payer or insurance type if you're in the healthcare field, or by the customer type, by the service or product type. Your sales cycle, if you're reaching targets every month, every quarter, or even every week. If you're reaching sales, if your cycle is affected by the types of services or products you're offering, or by whether you're getting them from returning customers or new customers. There's so many ways to slice data. So a lot of KPIs, which is the most important metric, I talked about that in the last session. A metric is a combination of two or more measures or ways of looking at specific numbers on a plotted graph. So a metric is a percentage or a fraction of a combination of two of these things. So it's a key performance indicator. It shows whether you're moving toward your goals or not. And each business really should have 2 to 3 main KPIs on if you want to use a dashboard or like a way of looking at whether you're moving toward your goals every day or every week. Another KPI might be an expense. The buying cycle. Are you buying more things when you have the highest profit, or are you buying a lot in lean months? That's a really good question that you can answer from a year in review. The value of your time is another one that a lot of business owners I don't think always think about. They don't consider the percentage of hours that are available that you've filled with client work, the net profit you receive by each type of service, the most profitable tasks. What are the 3 most profitable tasks that you do every day that will move that needle toward higher profit? And then another KPI is the most valuable customer you have. So after evaluating the client rating system, I thought about which customers had generated the most profit for me, not just the most sales, but the most left over. And I realized that some of them really didn't require a lot of expense, and they produced the highest profit. And other clients, I had to invest quite a lot in raw material and setup and preparation, but I didn't really end up with a lot at the end. Or sometimes I even lost money in certain client projects. So what's the expense versus profit for your clients? Are you enjoying working with them, but you're losing money? Because that is going to be a really important thought process. You don't want to work for free. You want to have something left over that you're building toward to get to your goals. Also, what's the best outcome you can get from the lowest effort? What are some services or products you can do without having to be involved? If you could do a hands-off, easy money generating process, are you doing that right now? And if so, how can you increase that? Because the less you have to touch these processes, the better for you. You can make more money without having to be directly involved. And then what type of customers are advocating for your business? Which ones are actively recruiting new potential customers or bringing you into opportunities where you can make more money? Those are an advocate level on the customer sales cycle. They would be the ones that have gone through the sales funnel, and then at the end, after they receive the benefit, they still are cheerleaders and advocates and actively trying to help you. So you would want to get as many people like that as active customers as you can. The third question is, I can't afford to turn away any potential customers right now. What do you recommend? I recommend considering that saying no is actually healthy, and it feels really, really scary. And in fact, it can feel so demoralizing and terrifying that a lot of people can't do it. They can't say no when you're faced with bills piling up and debt mounting and you need the money. That's basically puts you into a thought process of having a lack of something that you feel is vital, but that will lead you to making really bad decisions. And since most of the focus of my work is in strategic planning and strategic risk, I do talk a lot about the potential for bad things happening with decision making that's not based on the big picture. So a short-term win in getting a customer that's not ideal is that you might have some revenue, but the long-term effects are that you will burn yourself out. You will serve someone that's going to take a lot of your time and effort to keep happy, which is the 80-20 principle. 80% of the problems happen from 20% of those not so easy to deal with customers. And also 80% of your revenue and your profit is going to come from the 20% that are probably more quiet and don't complain. So it'd be better to increase the number of non-complaining ideal customers rather than to spend so much time trying to help those who really don't want anything to go well. Also, Steve Jobs had an interesting quote that sometimes it's kind of taken out of context. I wanted to read the whole quote. As you probably know, Steve Jobs was the CEO and founder of Apple, which is one of the most widely used products in history. Right now I'm using an Apple iPhone. He said this quote, "People think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. Focus means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. I'm actually as proud of the things we haven't done as the things I have done. Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things." So Steve said this at an Apple Worldwide Developers Conference in 1997. This quote has been restated in many, many ways, but at the heart of this, he's saying that innovation, in order to succeed and to be creative and to get the most benefit, you really have to say no to many, many other things in order to get the benefit from the one thing that will work. Evaluating your goals and only selecting people that will bring you closer to those goals is better long term. What is the hardest part about finding ideal customers? The hardest part. I think the hardest part is being honest with yourself. Self-analysis is a very difficult part of recognizing that people you're serving right now might be coming to you because they're feeding off of an energy that you may not want to be giving off. Also, finding a structured rating system like the one I mentioned, and I'll be giving the template away for free, so you can check that out. Accepting success is very difficult. The fear of success, I think, keeps a lot of people from moving past barriers. And also welcoming failure as a growth tool. I think that it's really hard sometimes to understand that failure is a good thing. It's something we should want to have happen. It is not possible to grow and learn unless we fall down and we stumble and we realize that something caused it, and we can get back up, take responsibility, and keep moving forward. Without the failure that we learn from, we will be plateauing at a level where we can't really succeed past that. And finally, I think another hard part about finding an ideal customer is that we find it difficult to imagine a perfect future where we have already succeeded, where everything that we wanted to accomplish has happened, where we've served the needs of people who are now flourishing and enjoying that benefit. And imagining that world can be very difficult. Fifth question, have you ever served the wrong kind of customer? Of course I have. I've made lots of mistakes, both as a consultant and previously in many other jobs, in management roles and in analysis roles, and I worked as a transcriptionist for many years for a major hospital. I've made a lot of mistakes in serving people, and most of those mistakes were because I didn't know myself. When you're trying to convince someone that you're worthy, you tend to give too much and to offer everything there is. And I couldn't do half the stuff that I was being asked to do, but I wanted to show that I was capable of doing it. So that kind of just fed this really bad cycle of serving people that I shouldn't have been serving. I did learn a lot from the experiences. It was a wonderful learning curve, but I failed a lot along the way. So 6 things I learned really quick. First, always set a client contract and define your expectations. I know so many business owners that don't have anything in writing, and then their customers can come back and complain, and ultimately they can withhold payment because there was nothing in writing that showed what they're going to receive in exchange for the payment. The second is to know what your philosophy is. I mentioned this earlier. Your philosophy is your understanding of the world and how you believe the world should be, what acknowledgments you make about others, what beliefs are absolutely vital in order for others to really receive benefit from what you do. If you're not clear about that, or if you can't communicate it, then it can be a really shocking thing for someone who expects you to think a certain way, but then they're kind of like not so happy when they find out later, oh, like that's not what I expected from that person at all. You don't have to share everything, but you do at least have to have some core beliefs that are obvious from the way that you do business. The third thing I learned was clear policies and procedures. Here's how my process works. Here's what you can expect. Here's the next step. Here are all the things that will happen in the next stage. This is when payment happens. This is when I call you. Everything is laid out and clear. I've made a lot of mistakes about waiting for things to happen and not directing the process. The fourth is you should give both parties an easy way out. There should be an easy exit clause, and plan ahead for that so that at any point if someone's uncomfortable, they don't feel embarrassed trying to leave the agreement. There's an easy way for them to not feel intruded upon, especially if you do something really intimate, for example, coaching or something physical with a person that may be very uncomfortable for them to try to cut off their work with you. So sometimes people will just not make another appointment and never tell you why. Other people might refuse to pay or might continue to see you but get increasingly uncomfortable, and it can just be really bad situations. So it's better to have a clause that either of you can cut off the relationship without any hurt feelings. The fourth one is you really need to have difficult conversations. Learn that it's better just to get it out in the open and talk about what's bothering them, and not let it fester. And the sixth thing is to stay true to your goals. So don't let the other people's objectives sway you toward things that you don't want to do. If someone asks you to do something that is really not in your wheelhouse or not in your plan, or it's not something you feel qualified to do, some people might say to go ahead and jump out of the airplane and build the parachute on the way, but I'm a little more cautious. I have done things like that, but I would say that don't be swayed by emotion. Don't be so taken by the accolade or the amazing belief that someone else has in you, that you agree to do something that doesn't line up with what you want to do in your business. I've seen this happen a lot. I think it's partly because we really want to be accepted and appreciated by others, so we sometimes let their interests and goals take over rather than being very clear about, this is what I do, this is who I do it for, this is the benefit that can happen from it, this is the value that you will get from working with me, and these are the boundaries of where I work. And if you're asking for something that's way over there, it's just not going to be something that I can help you with, but I will recommend someone else. And then there's a lot of respect that someone else will have for you if you create that kind of boundary. Okay, so the books I would recommend that have to do with ideal clients. First of all, classic book that I found at I think at a garage sale. This is the original Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. So this is the 90th printing from 1969. The first printing was in July 1940. So this little baby has been around since 1969, and I found it at some yard sale, but I'd never read it, and originally it was published in November 1936. This is a great book for getting a solid understanding of how influencing can affect other people, and really how to go through life making people more comfortable around you. I learned a lot. I read this a couple of years ago. He just has a lot of really inspiring nuggets of truth that I wasn't expecting. And I know it's been rewritten many times and it's probably more modern, but I really like the original because he shares from his heart as someone who was born at the turn of the century, possibly the 1800s. So that's one I would recommend. Next one is written by a professor and psychologist from Arizona State University, Dr. Robert Cialdini. It's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. This is a classic book that's been quoted by probably everyone that ever talks about influence. It's probably quoting him because this book has so much packed into it. It includes studies and discussions and even ways to influence people. There's 6: reciprocation, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity. It's such a valuable resource. I would highly recommend that you read it. I've learned a lot about the 6 ways to create influence, and I've actually applied a lot of his ideas to my own work. And the final one I would recommend is The Consulting Bible by Dr. Alan Weiss. So Dr. Weiss is, he's a consultant who teaches other people how to be financially independent and wealthy consultants. And he's also written something called The Millionaire, The Million Dollar Consulting, and a whole line of other books about that. He's funny, he's kind of irreverent. I really like his writing style, and he's come up with a lot of visual graphics that represent thought process. That's very, very helpful for me. I like to see things visually. So I recommend this as well, even if you're not a consultant. It helps to understand how people think and how to relate to customers. As I mentioned, my client rating system is based on his work. So thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for everybody who has provided questions in the last few weeks that I've tried to answer in this video. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to contact me. My website is laconticonsulting.com, and I appreciate just the input of a lot of people in the last few weeks from tuning in and for participating. And be sure to check out other videos that I've taped and articles I've written on my website. Have a great day.